A post-flood ice age. Without mountains or sea basins, water would cover the whole Earth to a depth of 1.7 miles. A biblical model of the effects of the flood leading to an ice age. Underwater earthquakes from water pressure. Post-flood volcanism. Volcanic dust, and thus more cloudiness. Barren land. Heating of the oceans by underwater volcanoes. High ocean evaporation, causing more snowfall. Snow cover cooling. Ice sheet growth. Tropical fossils which have been found at both the North and South Poles, which are evidence of a radical change of climate. A global flood was the cause for this change, and the conditions surrounding the flood are the best explanation for an ice age. Mount Everest. Could the water have covered Mount Everest, 5.5 miles high? Mountains formed towards the end and after the flood. Tectonic plate collisions, upthrusting. Uppermost parts of Mount Everest contain fossil-bearing, water-deposited layers. It is written, "And the waters prevailed so mightily upon the earth, that all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered. The waters prevailed above the mountains, covering them 15 cubits deep. And all flesh died that moved upon the earth, birds, cattle, beasts, all swarming creatures that swarm upon the earth, and every man, everything on the dry land, in whose nostrils was the breath of life, died." Marine fossils found on almost every mountain range in the world, the Alps, Andes, etc., and provide clear evidence that the oceans covered the continents. In the Andes Mountains, actual whale fossils have been found, as well as about 500 gigantic fossilized oysters, each of them in the area of about 12 feet across. Evolutionists would say that these mountains lifted up gradually, lifting up the fossils with them. But this assumption does not take into account the erosion rates, which are greater than the rate of uplift of the mountain. To quote David Catchpole, "Put simply, the stark conundrum is that if the Andes really were that old, they would no longer be here. These whales and oysters are proclaiming from the mountaintops the truth of God, of a biblical flood." Thinking back to Mount St. Helens, the radical change in this mountain is a very impressive example of what a volcano can do. When this volcano erupted, 230 square miles of forest were decimated. But actually, compared with volcanoes in Earth's history, Mount St. Helens is a very small volcano. We now have evidence from volcanoes in the past that were thousands of times more destructive than Mount St. Helens, and which produced thousands of times more volcanic dust than Mount St. Helens. Volcanoes on this scale, set off by a global flood, along with other factors surrounding the flood, can easily explain an ice age. An ice age caused by the Genesis flood, by Michael J. Ord. A detailed study of scientific evidence that the ice age was caused by the flood of Noah supports the biblical chronology of recent creation. Also, a recommended video about catastrophic plate tectonics and the Genesis flood. The evidence supports a worldwide flood. The Bible clearly teaches that the flood of Noah's day was global. Noah's flood covered the whole earth. Compromise in business, compromise in politics, compromise in education. We do not compromise the Word of God.